Madame Parisse.
Madame Parisse was regarded as the finest lady in the town of Besançon. A graceful woman, she carried herself with such poise that everyone admired her, from the wealthy to the working class. Her beauty, elegance, and charm made her the subject of many conversations. Everyone who saw her remarked how exquisite she was, and people often said that Monsieur Parisse, her husband, was one of the luckiest men in the entire region. Monsieur Parisse himself was a man of considerable standing, known throughout Besançon as a figure of great wealth and influence. He had built his fortune in commerce, and his business acumen had earned him respect and admiration from his peers. He held himself with the demeanor of someone who understood his place in society, always composed and dignified. His marriage to Madame Parisse had only added to his good fortune, for not only was she beautiful and elegant, but she also brought grace and refinement to his social standing. The couple had been married for several years, and to those who observed them from a distance, their relationship seemed idyllic. Monsieur and Madame Parisse were often seen attending social functions, charity events, and formal dinners, always together and always looking the part of the perfect couple. Wherever Madame Parisse went, she drew admiration. Her impeccable style, her polished manners, and her ability to engage in conversations with wit and charm made her a favorite among men and women alike. Her husband, ever the attentive companion, took pride in being by her side, basking in the glow of her admiration. Yet behind the facade of their seemingly perfect marriage, things were not as flawless as they appeared. Monsieur Parisse, like many men of his stature, had indulged in occasional indiscretions. His affairs were discreet, carefully conducted so as not to disturb the reputation he and his wife had built together. While his dalliances never became a matter of public gossip, it was an open secret among a few in their inner circle. For her part, Madame Parisse either did not know of her husband's activities or chose to ignore them. Whether through willful ignorance or quiet acceptance, she never let on that she had any suspicions. Life in Besançon continued as it always had. The Parisses remained at the center of the town's social elite, attending balls and soirees, their presence a mark of distinction at any event. Their home, a grand and stately mansion, was the site of many gatherings, where the finest wine flowed, and the most elegant guests mingled. Yet despite all the attention and admiration they received, there was a quiet distance that had grown between Monsieur and Madame Parisse. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to those around them, but it was there, a gap that had widened over the years. One day, word spread through the town that Madame Parisse had fallen gravely ill. It started as a whisper among the servants, but soon the entire town knew that the beautiful Madame Parisse was bedridden, her health rapidly declining. The best doctors in the region were called to her bedside, but none could determine the cause of her illness. Some speculated it was a fever, others whispered about mysterious ailments that plagued women of high society. Whatever the cause, it was clear that her condition was serious. Monsieur Parisse, upon hearing of his wife's illness, was beside himself with grief. The confident, composed man who had always been the picture of self-assuredness was now consumed with worry. He rarely left her side, pacing the floors of their home, wringing his hands, and praying for her recovery. For the first time, the townspeople saw a vulnerable side of Monsieur Parisse, a man who was deeply concerned for the woman who had been the centerpiece of his life. As days passed, Madame Parisse's condition worsened. She grew weaker with each passing hour, her once radiant complexion now pale and wan. The woman who had once been the epitome of elegance and grace was now confined to her bed, her body frail and fragile. Monsieur Parisse remained by her side, a constant presence in her sickroom, but despite his devotion, there was little he could do. The doctors tried every remedy they knew, but nothing seemed to help. Then, one evening, as Monsieur Parisse sat by his wife's bedside, a man arrived at the Parisse residence. He was a stranger, dressed in the uniform of a soldier, and he carried with him a letter. The servants, recognizing the importance of the man's arrival, quickly informed Monsieur Parisse, who met the soldier in the drawing-room. The soldier introduced himself, explaining that he had come on a matter of great importance. He handed Monsieur Parisse the letter and told him that it contained information about a great sacrifice Madame Parisse had made several years ago. The letter, the soldier said, would explain everything. Monsieur Parisse, confused and intrigued, took the letter and sat down to read it. As he opened the envelope and began to read, the story unfolded before his eyes. It told of an incident that had occurred many years earlier, an incident that had been kept secret from him and from everyone else in the town. The letter revealed that during a particularly difficult time for the family, Madame Parisse had been approached by the soldier, who had been a young man in need of assistance. He had been involved in a matter that could have caused a great scandal, one that would have damaged not only his reputation but also the reputation of the Parisse family. Knowing the gravity of the situation, Madame Parisse had agreed to help him, despite the personal risk it posed to her own standing. In the letter, the soldier explained how Madame Parisse had acted with courage and selflessness, intervening to prevent the scandal from reaching the public. Her actions had saved the family from disgrace, but in doing so, she had put her own honor on the line. She had never spoken of the incident, preferring to bear the burden of the secret alone, and had carried it with her all these years. Monsieur Parisse sat in stunned silence as he finished reading the letter. He had always believed that he knew everything about his wife, that she was the model of virtue and propriety. But here was proof that she had made a great sacrifice for the sake of their family, a sacrifice that she had kept hidden from him all these years. He had been unaware of her quiet strength, of the lengths she had gone to protect their name. As the weight of the revelation settled over him, Monsieur Parisse felt a mixture of emotions. He was filled with admiration for his wife's courage and selflessness, but he was also consumed with guilt. While he had been indulging in meaningless affairs, his wife had been carrying the weight of a secret that could have destroyed them. She had borne that burden alone, never once asking for his help or even his understanding. The soldier, seeing the turmoil in Monsieur Parisse's expression, quietly excused himself and left the house, leaving the letter behind. Monsieur Parisse remained in the drawing-room, holding the letter in his hands, his mind racing with thoughts of his wife and the incredible strength she had shown. That night, Madame Parisse's condition took a turn for the worse. Despite the doctor's best efforts, there was nothing more they could do. By morning, Madame Parisse had passed away, leaving behind a town in mourning. The news of her death spread quickly, and the people of Besançon grieved the loss of the woman they had admired for so long. Monsieur Parisse, devastated by the loss of his wife, was inconsolable. At the funeral, he stood by her casket, the letter still in his pocket, a constant reminder of the woman he had lost. As the townspeople came to pay their respects, he could not help but think of the sacrifice she had made, of the secret she had kept, and of the burden she had borne in silence. In the weeks following her death, Monsieur Parisse withdrew from public life. The man who had once thrived on social attention and admiration now found no comfort in the company of others. He spent his days in solitude, reflecting on the woman he had married and the sacrifice she had made for him and their family. The letter remained with him, a constant reminder of her strength and his own failings. Without his wife by his side, Monsieur Parisse's life began to unravel. His business, once thriving, started to decline. He lost interest in the affairs that had once consumed him, and without his wife's grace and influence, his social standing began to fade. The town, too, seemed to change. While people still spoke fondly of Madame Parisse, the world moved on, and new faces came to replace the old. As the years passed, Monsieur Parisse's decline continued. The once proud and confident man had become a shadow of his former self. He rarely left his home, and when he did, he was almost unrecognizable. His once stately appearance was now haggard, his posture hunched, his face etched with the lines of grief and regret. Though the memory of Madame Parisse began to fade from the minds of the townspeople, it never left Monsieur Parisse. He lived out his remaining years in quiet solitude, haunted by the memory of the woman who had sacrificed so much for him. The letter, now worn and faded, remained with him always, a symbol of the love and dedication she had shown. In the end, Madame Parisse's legacy was not the admiration of the townspeople, but the quiet, unspoken bond between her and her husband. She had carried the weight of the family's reputation on her shoulders, and though the world never knew the full extent of her sacrifice, Monsieur Parisse did. And in the end, that was all that mattered.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe and share our channel MagicMingle with your friends to enjoy more magical stories.